Like many 16-year-olds, Alexis Rasmussen was looking for a way to earn money to become independent and self-sufficient. So she became a nanny, a position she held until September 2011. She was hired and tasked with babysitting the children of a married couple who were planning a date. Everything should have gone smoothly, but it turned into a nightmare. Alexis Rasmussen was born in 1995, and her family lived in a small town in northern Ogden, Utah, not far from Salt Lake City. It's a quiet, peaceful town, perfect for family life. Since childhood, Alexis loved dancing, reading, and spending time with her family, especially her brother, who was also her best friend. They could spend hours simply watching movies and chatting. She was a very cheerful, smiling, and sociable girl. She wanted to be independent from her parents and have her own pocket money. As often happens, Alexis decided to become a nanny and look after children for a small fee. She began looking for this part-time job in the spring of 2011 among her friends, and through them, learned that a couple living nearby was looking for a nanny for their children. Alexis came to their interview and got the job right away. The couple, 38-year-old Dia and 36-year-old Eric Millerberg, appeared respectable and educated. They went to church every Sunday. Dia worked at a hospital, and the couple was raising 2 daughters. Their introduction went well, and the employers quickly found common ground with the young woman. So they agreed that Alexis would start work immediately. The teenager began visiting them almost every day, babysitting the children while the couple was at work. Their eldest daughter was 5 years old, and their youngest was only 9 months old. The 5-year-old daughter was from Dia's previous marriage, and she also had another older child who lived with her first husband. Everything was going great. Everyone was happy. Alexis now had some pocket money, which she spent as she pleased and even managed to save. The Millerbergs were finally able to work normally and spend time together. They liked that their children were always under the supervision of a young nanny. Alexis's parents, in turn, were also pleased that their daughter earned her own money and showed a desire to work, rather than disappearing off to parties with questionable crowds. Many of her friends also worked as nannies or waitresses, so this was considered the norm. This picture looked appealing to everyone until one day when tragedy struck. On September 10th, 2011, Alexis, as usual, went out to babysit her employer's 2 children. She was supposed to return home in the evening. However, at 11:30 p.m., the teenager contacted her mother, informing her that the girl's parents hadn't yet returned from their date and that she would have to stay late. Because of this, Alexis asked to stay the night so she wouldn't have to walk back through the dark streets. Her parents allowed her to stay at the Millerbergs' house because they considered them a decent family and didn't expect anything to happen. This was the last call the mother received from her daughter. In reality, Alexis Rasmussen's relationships with his employers were far from professional. Once the young nanny met the Millerbergs, they quickly became friends, but not in a good way. Dia and Eric had shady pasts, both with convictions for drug trafficking, and Eric with other offenses. At the time of the events described, both were on probation after further offenses, but at the time of their employment, neither Alexis nor her parents knew about this or suspected that she could be in potential danger in their home. Alexis quickly fell under the negative influence of the couple where she worked as a nanny. They introduced Alexis to alcohol and drank together. It all started with small amounts, but then the couple began throwing parties where the drinks flowed freely. Later, they introduced Alexis to the idea of a smoking trap. The teenager quickly became hooked, and later the couple began paying Alexis for her work with the children, not in cash, but in cash. From the outside, it wasn't obvious anything was wrong with the girl. She drank very little and returned home late, so the nanny's parents were unaware of her new habits and assumed their daughter was in good hands. But that turned out to be completely wrong. On September 11th, 2011, her parents were expecting their daughter home, but she never showed up after receiving a call about spending the night at the Millerbergs' house the previous night. They tried to reach her by phone, but to no avail. Their calls went straight to voicemail. The missing woman's mother called all of her daughter's friends, but no one had heard anything about her. She also called her daughter's employers, but they claimed the girl had left them that morning and had never been seen again. Eventually, the woman contacted the police and notified them of the teenager's disappearance. They immediately took the report and got to work. Alexis was put on the wanted list. The police first decided to question the married couple whose nanny was staying overnight, as they were the last ones to see her before she disappeared. Arriving at their home, the couple refused to let the detective in, citing the house's poor condition. They spoke with police officers outside the house. The Millerbergs reported that Alexis had left their home around 11:30 a.m. She was going to meet a friend. After she left, the entire family went to bed, so they don't know what happened to the girl. The officers noted that Dia and Eric may have been under the influence of stimulants during the conversation. This could explain their uncontrolled movements and overly cheerful manner of speaking. The couple's behavior struck investigators as suspicious. However, they lacked a search warrant, so police were unable to inspect the house, which they found odd. Detectives speculated about who Alexis was supposed to meet. She had a boyfriend, and it was possible he was the one she went to meet. Police went to talk to him. However, the missing boyfriend claimed he had no plans to meet her that morning. To prove this, he showed his phone and his messages with Alexis. After checking the phone, it turned out they had simply exchanged short messages shortly before the young nanny stopped responding. The man claimed he had no idea where she might have gone or who she was spending her time with. Detectives interviewed Alexis's other friends and classmates and discovered that no one had seen her since her disappearance. It was as if she had vanished. However, everyone claimed she had no enemies or ill-wishers. She was an ordinary teenager with no ties to the criminal underworld. The idea of a runaway was dismissed because all of her belongings, including the money she had saved, were left behind. Moreover, she had never run away from home before and wasn't considered a troubled teenager. All leads led to the married couple who employed the missing woman. Her phone couldn't be traced. Unfortunately, at the time, her parents were unaware of the existence of an app that could have helped them track Alexis's real location in this situation. This is the Blink app, a replacement for the closed Zenly app. Incidentally, this app was created by Zenly's developers. Blink allows you to track the movements of loved ones and friends in real time, who voluntarily share this data. It's also extremely secure. You can't track strangers unilaterally, eliminating the risk of stalking. To track the movements of loved ones, you need to send them a request from your contact list, which they must accept. It's actually very convenient to see on the map whether there are any friends nearby you could run into. You can also message them and meet them in the Blink app using the interesting Shake feature. When two users meet at the same location and simultaneously shake their phones, their mutual friends will receive a notification and can join you too. A big plus is that you can hide from people you're in a fight with, for example. But unfortunately, it's not permanent, only for 24 hours and from selected users. I hope the app's developers will provide this option to hide your location from everyone for a longer period of time. In any case, Blink remains the best alternative to Zenly in terms of functionality. The last time it pinged was at Eric and Dia's house. Their home was Alexis's last known location, and there was no evidence the teenager had left the house that morning. So investigators began to look into the couple further. They then discovered that the Millerbergs had previous convictions for drug trafficking, and Eric had a turbulent criminal record. The couple was on probation at the time. During the investigation, police discovered that Alexis's friends were aware of the relationship that had truly developed between the nanny and her employers. Before Alexis, there were several other teenagers, including friends of the missing woman, who also babysat the couple's children in exchange for booze and marijuana. Everyone was happy with these working conditions because it allowed minors access to alcohol and drugs. This information was confirmed by several witnesses. It was proven beyond doubt that Dia had sold prescription drugs to one of Alexis's friends, which she had access to. She received approximately $100 for all of this. The detectives returned to the Millerbergs, revealing their knowledge of their shady dealings with substances. The couple admitted to giving the teenagers drugs, but denied any involvement in Alexis's disappearance. Nevertheless, they were arrested for distributing controlled substances and violating probation. They were jailed and faced up to 5 years in prison. The case was complicated by the fact that they were getting minors addicted to drugs. Police also contacted friends and acquaintances of the arrested couple in search of valuable information, but all refused to cooperate. This was likely due to the possibility that they themselves might be involved in criminal activity. By that point, detectives were certain the Millerbergs were responsible for Alexis's disappearance, from whom they had never heard. Detectives obtained a search warrant for the couple's home and examined it, but were unable to find anything suspicious. However, they did find a large quantity of illegal drugs in the house. Eric and Dia's children were removed by Child Protective Services. The older daughter was given to her biological father, and the younger child was placed in foster care. It was only after a month of investigation that officers received a confidential informant who contacted them by phone. He revealed that Alexis had indeed remained at her employer's home on the night of her disappearance. The next morning, she didn't leave or meet anyone, just as the detectives had suspected. That night, Eric offered her some powerful drugs. The teenager agreed to try them, and he injected her with several doses. After this, Alexis began acting erratically and didn't understand what she was doing. Eric coerced her into intimacy. The head of the family's wife also tried to join their orgy, but was too late. During the procedure, the couple noticed that the girl was extremely disoriented and had an abnormally low body temperature. Dia, who had a medical background, realized she needed urgent help. The couple carried her to the bathroom and placed her in hot water to warm her up. Alexis was conscious and seemed to be improving. She asked to be left alone and relax. The Millerbergs left the house to smoke and consider their next steps. They were terrified by her condition. When they returned, they realized Alexis was still cold. Eric and Dia then pulled her out of the water, wrapped the teenager in a warm blanket, and laid her on the bed. Afterwards, the couple went outside for a smoke break to discuss what had happened. When they returned, they found Alexis unconscious, with something resembling mucus coming from her mouth. Dia, a nurse, tried to revive the girl using all her skills, but it was too late. By that point, she was already dead. Eric and Dia were terrified, as both were on parole and probation. They didn't want to go back to jail, so they asked their friends to help them dispose of the body. To do this, they needed a car, which the couple didn't have. However, everyone turned them down. No one wanted to get involved in this situation and face jail time for aiding and abetting. The couple themselves were panicked, fearing they would be sent back to prison and losing their children. In desperation, they called another friend and asked to borrow his car. He agreed and gave it to them. The couple loaded the girl's body into the trunk and drove to another county. There, in a remote wooded area, they hid the body. The confidential informant who tipped off the police was Eric Smith. He was the one who gave them his car when he still had no idea what was happening. He later helped the couple move the already decomposing body to a more remote location. He heard all the information they provided during that trip. The man felt remorse for helping this pair of monsters and decided to tell investigators, who were desperate for this information. Thanks to this tip, police discovered the missing girl's body on October 18th, 2011, 38 days after her disappearance. The victim was found in a fetal position, her legs pressed against her body, partially hidden in a trash bag. It was impossible to immediately identify the body in front of the police due to the advanced state of decomposition. The body was discovered in a shallow grave, barely concealing it from view. A thorough forensic examination was necessary to identify the body, as well as to establish the cause of death and all the circumstances of the incident. The girl was identified by dental records and fingerprints. As expected, she was Alexis Rasmussen. An autopsy and post-mortem examination revealed that the level of heavy metals in Alexis's body was 7 times higher than the lethal dose. This could well have been the cause of death, but it wasn't the only one. Furthermore, signs of strangulation, blunt force trauma, and stab wounds were found on her body. The poor condition of her body made it difficult to accurately identify all the wounds. It was so badly decomposed that a precise cause of death could not be determined, so the most obvious was chosen: an overdose. But no one doubted that this was no accident. The girl had been sexually assaulted. The Rasmussen family requested confidentiality during the investigation due to the victim's minor age. A memorial service was held for the deceased, attended by many residents of her hometown of Ogden. Everyone was shocked by the tragedy. The teenager's body was buried on October 29th. In exchange for providing information and assisting the investigation, Smith's informant was promised not to be held accountable for complicity in the crime. His words truly proved instrumental in locating the body, finding evidence, and bringing charges. Therefore, he appeared in court only as a witness. During preparation for the trial, Eric's cell phone records were reviewed. Indeed, on the night of the girl's disappearance, he called his friend several times, asking for help getting rid of something. Security cameras were also checked, one of which captured Nurse Dia. On September 10th, 2011, at around 10:20 p.m., the woman visited the Walgreens pharmacy to purchase some medications that induce altered states of consciousness. Police conducted a more thorough search of the detainee's home. Luminol revealed tiny blood stains. It was clear that they had attempted to cover up the evidence with a thorough cleaning. But luminol can detect blood stains even after cleaning. Apparently, the unfortunate criminals weren't aware of this. A section of the old carpet had been cut off and thrown away. The police believed there was blood on it that the couple couldn't clean off, so they simply cut the piece off and threw it away. The police were puzzled as to where the blood in the house could have come from, since, according to the informant's story, there shouldn't be any after an overdose, meaning something more sinister had happened. The victim had likely been sexually assaulted. Detectives then obtained a search warrant for their friend's car, which the victim was transporting. But it turned out the car had already been sold in another county. It took time to recover it, but when the car was finally found and sent for analysis, it was discovered that the old trunk upholstery had been cut off and discarded. However, microscopic traces of blood remained underneath. All these DNA samples were sent for analysis, which revealed that they belonged to Alexis. The informant also told detectives that it could have been a premeditated murder. The couple may have decided to get rid of the nanny to prevent her from turning them in to the police for drug trafficking and harassment. The police also favored this theory, as there were some signs of planning. Eric was initially charged with child abuse and drug trafficking, while Dia was charged only with forging a prescription. After new evidence came to light, the man was also charged with first-degree murder, attempted obstruction of justice, and sexual intercourse with a minor. A forensic examination later revealed that the girl's body had been abused after her death, which was also a criminal offense under state law. The couple was tried separately. Dia's trial began in April 2012, where she was charged with illegally obtaining a prescription for controlled substances and obstructing justice. For this, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison in 2015, but by that point, she had already served 3 years of the sentence. The woman was scheduled to serve out the remainder of her sentence in prison, but the defendant was extremely outraged by the jury's decision. She delivered a moving speech, declaring her regret for what had happened, but denying her guilt or involvement in the girl's death. Her husband was to blame. Dwyer made no apologies, but expressed her deepest condolences to the family of the deceased. The court found imprisonment to be an appropriate punishment for everything the couple had done. This included distributing substances to minors, engaging in sexual intercourse, and intentionally drugging a teenager with illegal substances. Furthermore, the couple clearly attempted to dispose of the body and confuse the investigation. Suffice it to say, she was buried twice because Eric considered the first location insufficiently secure. This spoke volumes about the meticulous planning of the crime. Dia stated that, 3 years into her imprisonment, she had realized her mistakes. She wanted to take a worthy place in society and asked for freedom, attempting to demote the participants in the trial. Naturally, this didn't work, and no one believed her. She simply wanted to avoid further imprisonment, so the assembled commission rejected her ploys and advocated for the woman's continued imprisonment. Dia was sent to prison to serve the remainder of her sentence, but she was soon eligible for parole. Surprisingly, Eric and Dia's love story quickly ended in prison. The former lovers began to squabble. Dia filed for divorce, and they divorced. While in prison, Eric changed his old tattoo, which had his girlfriend's name, Dia, on his neck, to Dev, which means death in English. This resulted in disciplinary action against the man, which he received while awaiting trial in July 2013. Eric Millerberg's trial began in March 2014. The man pleaded not guilty to all charges. According to him, on the night of the girl's disappearance, she did indeed stay overnight to babysit. After returning home from their date, they began using drugs together. The girl asked him to, took 3 doses, and then the 3 of them attempted sexual intercourse. However, their condition prevented this. Regarding the drug administration, the defendant claimed Alexis had done everything voluntarily. The defendant's turbulent criminal past was brought up in court. Eric Millerberg has a history of criminal convictions. From 1997 to 2011, he served time in prison for burglary, use of a firearm, and obstructing police arrest. He was also associated with a white supremacist group. At the trial, the victim's friends and acquaintances filled the front rows of the courtroom. Grief was evident in everyone's eyes. This hearing was difficult for them, as for the first time, some delicate details of the underage girl's life were concealed. Until then, her relatives hadn't known that her employers had recently been paying her for her services with substances supplied by adults. They were the ones who hooked the teenager on them. It seemed the head of the Millerberg family felt no remorse for this. He even bragged to a cellmate while in custody during a trial for supplying and soliciting minors with illegal substances. This likely led to conflicts with other inmates. He was attacked by his cellmate, Simon Russell. He stabbed Eric approximately 30 times, primarily targeting his head and neck. Eric also sustained numerous defensive wounds to his arms. The victim was subsequently transferred to the hospital, where his condition was confirmed to be satisfactory. He received first aid, and Eric survived. A day after the incident, the attacker was charged with attempted murder and obstruction of justice. Eric's provocative behavior was considered outrageous not only behind bars, but also in the courtroom. A 36-year-old man was accused of supplying a 16-year-old girl with prohibited substances and engaging in inappropriate behavior toward her. On the night of her death, prosecutors alleged that he was involved in actions that led to her passing. The defendant's wife testified against him, claiming that he forced the teenager to take multiple doses of a substance. According to her statement, the girl's condition worsened, and despite attempts to help her, she died. The prosecution argued that the defendant exploited the victim's trust and acted out of selfish motives. They claimed his actions directly contributed to her death, and that the injuries found on her body indicated intentional harm rather than an accident. The defense, however, challenged this narrative. The defense attorney argued that the wife's testimony was unreliable and motivated by her desire to avoid responsibility. According to the defense, there was no direct evidence proving that Eric administered a lethal dose of any substance. The medical examiner determined that the official cause of death was an overdose, although other injuries were documented. However, investigators could not definitively determine whether the substance had been self-administered or given by another person. Both sides presented conflicting versions of events, with each placing responsibility on the other. The defense maintained that the incident was a tragic accident rather than a deliberate act, while the prosecution insisted that the evidence pointed to homicide. The trial became highly controversial and emotionally charged. Before the verdict, on the advice of his attorneys, Eric agreed to plead guilty to several charges. He acknowledged partial responsibility for the events and expressed remorse to the victim's family, hoping for a more lenient sentence. However, he continued to deny that the crime had been premeditated. Moreover, as was proven by surveillance camera footage, it was she who went to the pharmacy for prescription medications and forged the prescriptions herself. Despite this, the victim's relatives were more inclined to believe that the main person responsible for the tragedy was Eric. They appealed to the judge with a request to impose the maximum possible sentence on the offender. The parents wanted a life sentence without the possibility of parole, so that he would never be released from prison. The court found him guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. She later applied for parole 3 times. The first application was submitted in 1 year, and then again in another year. Both were denied. However, in a later year, her request was approved, as she had completed rehabilitation courses for addiction and also finished a culinary vocational program that would allow her to reintegrate into society. She was released on October 16th of that year. Her Dalmatia Sudba is unknown. Eric became eligible for parole in a certain year. He has already filed a petition for release, but it was denied, and he still remains behind bars. The victim's family hopes that he will never be released. If you liked my work, please subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss it in the comments.